What's up, you scholars of enlightenment? Dr. Sam Gregson, particle physicist here again. I hope you've had a wonderful week and have a fantastic weekend in store. Now, last time out, I gave my thoughts on the recent Sean Carroll versus Eric Weinstein Piers Morgan debate. And those thoughts upset quite a few Eric fans. Eric fans who seem to believe that Eric Weinstein is a genius being suppressed and ignored by university professors who can't tell you what a woman is.
Our survey said
that they have intellectual humility and honesty because they don't believe in man-made climate change or evolution.
0.
That Sean Carroll acts as enforcement muscle for the theoretical physics establishment.
It's fiction.
And insists that I'm engaging more in a sociology debate than a scientific one, and writing hit pieces by posting verbatim clips of Eric and providing relevant context.
It's an urban legend that never happened.
Guys, you really aren't helping Eric's cause.
They're not sending their best. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us.
Allow me to reiterate what should have been clear from part one of this mini-series. The reason we're largely having a sociological debate about Eric Weinstein and his geometric unity theory of everything is because there is no scientific debate to have. The maths underpinning Eric's theories is broken, incomplete, and largely incoherent.
Myth totally failed, completely busted. Totally, completely busted.
all right, still rolling.
And the beautiful thing is, you don't have to take my word for it. Just trust what Eric wrote in his own paper. We, years ago, remember following such reductions along the lines of Barnaton and Witten, which involve incorporating an endomorphism of the non-compact complements into two, the Hodge-star operators, but have yet to successfully resurrect the technique, nor have we found our notes for this period.
Where are they? Where are they?
Such problems of reconstruction over nearly 40 years are, lamentably, found throughout this document, but they are likely to get worse rather than better by waiting to fix them.
And this is why this paper is not going to appear in the peer-reviewed literature. It's not serious. It's a dog ate my homework kind of thing.
Or maybe this one. The particulars of the Shiab operators are workmanlike and not of much interest. They're only the most important thing in this theory.
I don't know how to put this, but I'm kind of a big deal.
The author remembers choosing them years ago via representation theory techniques involving highest weight representations. Unfortunately, the author is no longer conversant in that language.
My car's broken down and I wondered if you could tell me where to find a garage.
Well, that's wasted on me. I don't understand what you're saying.
You don't speak any English at all?
Not a word, no.
And has not been able to locate the notes from decades ago. Do we see a pattern here? That originally picked out the operator of choice. The author either hopes to find the original calculations or to get back to the point where he can reconstruct this argument.
It's a dog ate my homework kind of thing.
And in summary, the approach of geometric unity as a candidate physical theory of our world is to work with a variety of different bundles in both finite and infinite dimensions, which are all generated from a single space, x to the 4. The structure of the relationships may be summarized here. We recall that there is a theory of sections above the infinite dimensional constructions on the right-hand side, involved with superspaces and so-called induced representations, but at this point cannot remember even the standard theory, and so have not entered into it here.
I forgot.
And may do so in further work if there's sufficient interest and ability to recall. And obviously, there is no such interest.
You shouldn't use my name.
Dodson! Dodson! We've got Dodson here! See, nobody cares.
Even Sabine Hossenfelder, who shares many platforms with Eric, takes him incredibly seriously and shares many of his contrarian tendencies, has absolutely no clue what Eric is rambling on about when it comes to geometric unity.
Well, first, maybe let me make a comment about what Eric just said. He complained that there has not been any substantive discussion about geometric unity. I think that's because no one has any idea what you're talking about in the first place. I think you're severely underestimating the communication problem. You have to work much, much harder on that. And yeah, I watched your lecture, and I think that I'm among the 500,000 people who watched your video. I'm probably one of those who have a pretty good starting point in understanding what you're even talking about, and even I only have a very vague idea what you're even up to.
Do you know what we do here? My section.
Sir, yes, sir, I have an idea.
Whoa. Let's say you have no idea and leave it at that, okay? No idea.
I am not the one pushing nonsense. The ones pushing nonsense for clicks, likes, and clout are those influencers fawning over Eric, desperately propping up his broken ideas, and conveniently failing to inform you of their broken nature. If you prefer to be left in the dark, that's on you. I'm not your daddy.
But daddy is a state of mind, you know what I'm saying? I'm your daddy.
In addition, experts have heard, considered, and undermined Eric's ideas numerous times over the last decade. Eric presented his ideas to experts at Oxford in 2013. He was immediately told that his ideas do not provide the appropriate anomaly cancellation and fall at the first hurdle. Experts also pointed out that his theories predict strongly interacting particles that should be observed at the Large Hadron Collider, and are not. In short, Eric's ideas were heard and dismissed 12 years ago.
Oh well, that's all ancient history now.
He then disappeared for 8 years before another PR drive in 2021, during which he posted a paper outlining his ideas. This paper did not address any of the long-standing and fatal expert criticisms of his work.
Hello, Ian. Long time no see.
Mr. Pigden. You're alive.
I'm alive, he says. How are you doing?
I can't believe it. Someone said you was dead.
He's now returning for yet another rerun in 2025, with Brian Keating and Kurt Jaimungal doing the best to breathe life into a long-defunct idea. Again, Eric has failed to rectify the flaws in his paper over the last 4 years.
Well, it's Groundhog Day. Again?
There is no scientific debate around geometric unity because Eric refuses to get serious, engage with expert criticism, correct his mistakes, produce a sound paper, and submit his work to peer review. Eric's math ain't mathin'. That is not a smear. It's a fact. This ship in a bottle has sprung more than a few leaks over the past 12 years. And that's why we're having a sociological debate. Because Eric wants one. He wants to tell you falsely that he is being marginalised, scientists aren't listening, and Sean Carroll is a hatchet man for the establishment. Because all of this mud, shade, and nonsense distracts from the obvious, glaring reality. His ideas have been heard many times and on many platforms, and no one serious is interested.
I didn't kill my wife! I don't care!
The irony is that those defending Eric by decrying hatchet jobs and personal attacks are the very people protecting Eric from submitting his work to peer review. They're the ones falling for his excuses, insulating him from criticism and ensuring that this discussion remains in the realm of sociology, never to trouble the peer-reviewed literature. However, if Eric wants a discussion of these matters, well, I'm happy to oblige, because it ends about as well for him as the scientific discussion.
Goddamn right we'll play.
In this video, I will dive into some of the arguments Eric makes against physicists and physics to explain his supposed marginalisation and outline why they carry so little weight. This uncensored interview is a great jumping off point because Eric's own words encapsulate a whole host of reasons why physicists just don't take him very seriously. You might ask at this point why anyone would bother to engage with this stuff if it has very little scientific merit. And that's a good question. Well, arguments suggesting that whole scientific fields are corrupt, misguided, and dying continuously crop up in contrarian and culture war media. Indeed, Eric is still churning them out. He's posting through it. He is a true poster. And while these arguments are hugely flawed, they have real impacts on the public perception of science. When that perception is tainted, it becomes far easier for administrations to aggressively slash science budgets. Unlike Eric, these impacts are serious. In my opinion, scientists have ceded online spaces to accusatory publicity hounds and insulting contrarians for long enough. It's time to roll up our sleeves and push back with the same energy and bite they display. So let's dive into Eric's main contention that he and his niche ideas are being unfairly sidelined by establishment physicists, whatever they are, because it's a contention that holds no water. Eric uses a couple of major arguments to explain why his ideas are not at the forefront of theoretical physics. Firstly, he suggests that powerful influences are maligning him and making universities feel threatened to associate with him. Secondly, he suggests that the field of theoretical physics is so dominated by string theory that it cannot engage with fresh and novel ideas like geometric unity. As you might expect, both of these arguments are entirely baseless. Let's start with the former argument. Eric claims that physics influencers have cornered the market and hence can create an environment of fear that turns experts and universities against him and other mavericks.
What you are doing is creating an environment of fear where every university worries, what does it mean to talk to this person? And what I would say to you is you are commenting on the effect that you are in fact inducing. You and a small cadre of people are like intellectual border collies of the physical sciences, casting shade and aspersions on those who are succeeding where the quantum gravity, string theoretic, and M theoretic programs are failing. Your intellectually insulting aspect reminds me of you as the Marie Antoinette of theoretical physics influencers.
What the hell is even that?
These physics media titans are pushing the orthodox message of theoretical physics and strangling ideas like geometric unity in their intellectual crib. So, are powerful physics influencers coming after Eric and scaring universities away from recognizing his undoubted brilliance? No, they are not.
Not this time.
The idea that mainstream physicists have a stranglehold on online spaces is entirely absurd on its face. The online, contrarian-heavy influencer space is blatantly stacked in Eric's favour. Eric continuously appears on huge channels saying the most idiotic things about multiple topics he knows nothing about. UAPs.
I want to know whether this is right or wrong so much better, so much more than I want to know whether UFOs exist. UFOs, to me, are an indication of whether I'm right or wrong. So when you talk about things like, oh, these things are behaving like nothing I've ever seen, well, there are a couple of things that I'm worried about if these things are real. One is, does somebody else know how to grow rulers and shrink rulers and grow watches and shrink watches, speed them up, slow them down, in order to get in control of the thing that we thought was space-time?
Israel, Gaza.
So, can I just push back a little? They also videoed themselves committing those murders. Why is that not something he wouldn't have wanted? Why do that?
Well, I think people don't understand in some sense why the world is behaving the way it is, in part because we've lost an appreciation for revolutionary thinking and revolutionary ideology. Right now, we have a situation in which nobody can figure out what queers for Hamas means. It seems like, do these people not get it? In fact, the sort of radical queer agenda is part of a general revolutionary agenda. And the key point about revolutions is that it's not that you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet, where an egg is a head. It's that we want to make omelets because you get to break eggs. And in some sense, one of the things is finally somebody had the courage to kill Jewish children, Jewish families, and do the unthinkable, whereas everybody else is in general too much of a coward to do that. And thank God Hamas finally rose to the challenge. And this is thinking that's very hard to think about, but I have a jihadi sandbox in my head.
Jeffrey Epstein.
But I don't know why. I don't know why Jeffrey Epstein was interested in physics.
Well, what would you guess?
There's some special mathematics there that allows him to, or the people that he is associated with, to better be able to predict things, to be able to use it in some sort of a way around financial markets, around new technology that's emerging, to just be able to see the direction that the future of technology is moving in, perhaps? You know more about this than me. Come on.
Well, I'd go back to this conference that he held. I think it's 2006 or 2004, called Confronting Gravity. So he holds a conference. I don't think he holds it on this island, on his island. I think he holds it on St. Thomas, maybe. And this is entirely consonant with an earlier meeting that he had with me, where he wanted to know about what I was doing with mathematical physics. And I have to say, look, why gravity? Gravity is in some sense about the fabric of space-time. And if there are things about the fabric of space-time that you can unlock that are not contained in general relativity nor in the standard model, how much power do you think is in that? You know that the first person outside of me to get a look at geometric unity was Jeffrey Epstein. How did he know I was working on this? I don't know. I wasn't really talking about this stuff until, even my close friends didn't really know what I was up to. It's really weird when the government is actually out to get you, when they actually send a spy, when they actually engage in disinformation campaigns, when they smear you. I'll tell you why I built my channel.
The freedom.
It's going to be a lot harder to roll me this time in an alley.
Yeah.
I got rolled multiple times. And my point is, I didn't want to become a celebrity. I didn't want to become well known. But it's a lot harder to roll somebody who's getting, I don't know if this is mistaken, but I think I'm the math PhD with the largest number of followers on Twitter. Assume that I get banned on social media because somebody wants to make sure that my message doesn't interfere with the dominant narrative.
Yeah.
What's going to happen is that there'll be a whole bunch of very low quality bot-like accounts that dog you every time you talk about me.
Right.
Dude, it's getting old, getting boring. We already heard you. Dude, that was let it go. Not a good look. You'll start to see your follower count go down because it's easy to give you a bunch of bot-like follows and then just pull them.
So how do we, what's the heroic action here on the...
Well, for example, having Ashley Matthews on my program.
These influencers cynically leverage Eric's profile to boost their views and clout.
For I am a grifter, and this is Grifting 101.
Many large physics influencer channels are incredibly obvious Eric stans and spend hundreds of hours soft-soaping him, fawning over his broken ideas, and excusing his horrid behaviour towards physicists. Here are a few clips from the Theories of Everything YouTube channel, hosted by Kurt Jaimungal.
Welcome to the Iceberg of Geometric Unity, a comprehensive and technical edition. Just so you know, this episode took a combined 250 hours across 3 different editors and several rewrites on my part. It's on par with the most labor that's gone into any single Theories of Everything video, comparable to the iceberg of string theory, and that's saying something. Why are you nervous?
You're formidable. Sean Carroll doesn't make me as nervous as you do, and he's hostile and you're not. You've arrived. I'm nervous for the right reasons because we're actually going to have a conversation, and I never have a conversation.
What is a core idea of geometric unity that if people knew more about it, it would get them as excited about GU as you are?
That despite the fact, it's a great question, first of all. I believe it is the only claim of a theory that starts from essentially as close to nothing as you can in mathematics to try to derive everything we see.
I don't think so.
Thank you to Eric Weinstein. It's an avant-garde and creative theory. Kurt here, several months later. This has been so long in the making. Geez, you have no idea. Anyhow, I wanted to say that I mean what I just said. I may have said this before in the iceberg, and if I haven't, I should have because it bears repeating. I haven't seen a theory like this come from any single individual ever. Not one that's this fleshed out or has this amount of unexampled connections within itself, as well as to what's known as the theoretical physics backbone that we talked about earlier.
Now, Eric, there's lots of people doing stuff like that about it.
Interesting take on a theory that is mathematically shot and does not recover the standard model, general relativity, and dark matter from first principles, despite Eric's grand pronouncements. You'd never know that this ship in a bottle has more leaks than the Titanic. Here's the introduction to one of Brian Keating's latest, Weinstein oil massages.
Quantum gravity is a mental disease which theoretical physics needs to rid itself of, and people have to be willing to say that in public.
Eric Weinstein is one of the most revered thinkers of our generation.
According, of course, to Eric Weinstein.
The great nap is now over. Right now, where we are is 4 light years from the nearest star. There is no way to get to the speed of light or even close. The problem is that the culmination of all human theory about the base reality stagnated abruptly and mysteriously in 1973.
Is the cosmological constant really necessary?
So we have a cosmological constant term without an explanation, and an explanation torsion without a term.
And a radical new prediction that could explain the recent results from the DESI project. A startling claim that Einstein's cosmological constant is not at all what Einstein thought it was.
This is the term which everyone loves. This is the term which we keep going back and forth. Is it a blunder? Is it genius? Is it a blunder? Is it genius?
In today's talk, you're about to witness an update to his groundbreaking theory, first presented at Oxford in 2013. This lecture was held live at the UC San Diego Physics Department in the Mayer Room in April 2025. At UCSD's prestigious Astroparticle Cosmology Seminar. Here, one of the most brilliant mathematical physicists of our time presents his revolutionary theory of everything to an audience of awed skeptics and supporters.
Oh God, why didn't anybody tell me? Oh my God, my insides are on fire!
Eric is perhaps the most interesting and mercurial and delightfully challenging person that I've ever met.
Let's say that his models are correct. Why doesn't he publish that in peer-reviewed journals?
There's no Eric's mind works in multiple dimensions in ways that normal people can't really contemplate. So, for example, when we talk about peer review, he is already like 5 steps down the road. But the bottom line is he does not hold by peer review. So this is not something that, in fact, when he published quote unquote his most recent disputations about what he calls geometric unity, it was first shown on Joe Rogan's podcast, immediately shown on mine, live from Austin, Texas, from his hotel room. And we went into the details of it that, Joe is not going to go into on the physicist level. Right. But he copyrighted it as a work of entertainment. I'm an entertainer. So that it could not be plagiarized by forces such as those that Eric has claimed proof and demonstrable proof has copied his ideas in the past. And some of his claims are very meritorious in my opinion. Not all of them necessarily. I'm not saying he's lying, but I'm just saying I haven't investigated them. But at least 1 or 2 I've personally investigated and found him to be correct. So
are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
The problem with Eric's theories, ideas, is because he's such an influential public intellectual, because he's probably one of the brightest living human beings. And I've interacted, I've had 14 Nobel Prize winners on my podcast, and I'm not saying this lightly, but Eric easily can hold his own with any of them, from economics to astrophysics. Okay. But his intellect goes beyond that. Because of that, he's attracted a huge cadre of people that would love to see him fail, be humiliated.
100%. I see that 100%. Yeah, he has a massive target on his back.
No, please, no more.
It's different than even the COVID vaccine, so-called vaccine. I don't really call it a vaccine because it didn't really seem to do what a vaccine typically does with dead viruses and so forth. But anyway, let's call it a vaccine.
And here's Eric's towel boy running desperate interference for Eric after his recent disastrous appearance with Sean Carroll, and attempting to smear Carroll as a liar for correctly identifying the flaws and missing content in Eric's paper.
1 million people saw the smackdown. Almost none of them understood it, but I'm going to break it down for you. All the zingers, the science, and what the hell was actually going on between Sean Carroll and Eric Weinstein. The battle royale started with a challenge. Eric throws down the gauntlet.
Dr. Carroll, I'd like to hear your explanation for 3 generations of flavor chiral fermions with the observed quantum numbers.
Sean opens Eric's theory, Translation? He's demanding Sean explain why the standard model works, but doesn't explain it.
I have read Eric's paper. Here it is. I actually have it here. It's worse than you would think.
That was Sean's attempt at a diagnosis. He's saying that this isn't physics, it's a manifesto, snidely implying that it's not worth his time. Eric fires back.
How dare you? Your intellectually insulting aspect reminds me of you as the Marie Antoinette of theoretical physics influencer.
Eric's furious, not just about the zingers, but about exclusion, gatekeeping. He believes physics is being gatekept by insiders posing as open-minded explorers. He's brought down gates before in his famous conversation with Terrence Howard on Joe Rogan. But Sean's no bureaucrat.
Gravity doesn't fit. And indeed, it was recognized pretty quickly that there was a good reason why gravity doesn't fit. And people looked at that and said, we have no idea how to make that happen. Let's not worry about quantum gravity.
He calmly walks through why physicists still take string theory seriously. In other words, string theory may be wrong. It may be weird, but it seems to work, at least in some cases. And it gives him reason not even to think about Eric's theory of geometric unity. Eric fights back. The whole system's in crisis. He believes geometric unity can solve the problem string theorists haven't dared to touch in decades. He's also accusing Sean and his ilk of fear-mongering and gatekeeping.
And then string theory comes along. And again, it wasn't even trying to be a theory of gravity, but when they do this calculation, the miraculous cancellation happens.
You could also decide to geometrize the quantum rather than quantize gravity and thus quantize the geometry.
There is no quantum mechanics.
No, Sean, how dare you cast shade and aspersions of the kind that I wouldn't seek to cast on you, but I will now.
Okay.
I'm not seeking your favor, nor do I need to seek your approval.
So is this a debate between a maverick and a guardian of orthodoxy? Or between two men who agree on more than they admit? Stay tuned. I'm going to break down the details of this because I don't think many people understand it. And I want to make sure that you do, because you're the most brilliant audience in the multiverse. You need to understand the stakes couldn't possibly be higher. Eric just caught Sean lying about his lack of Lagrangian's geometric unity. Tune into Eric on Twitter to find out more.
No, I don't think I will.
Brian Keating has dedicated his entire channel to defending Eric for the last 2 weeks. It's pathetic. Sabine Hossenfelder, another massive physics YouTuber, says that no one takes the foundations of physics more seriously than Eric Weinstein.
I believe I take the foundations of physics much more seriously than anyone else I know, with the possible exception of Eric Weinstein, but that's another story that shall be told another time.
No one beats Eric. Not Nima Akani Hamed, not Ed Witten, not Brian Greene. Not any of the brilliant rockstar theoretical physicists working to unravel the mysteries of our universe on an everyday basis. Given how unserious we have already shown Eric to be, this is an absurd and blatantly self-serving assessment intended to play to and exploit the tendencies of Eric's contrarian audience. We'll get to Sabine and her nonsensical take on future colliders next time. Given all of this, it's clear that Eric has a huge support network of loud and influential voices online. Yet, as is typical for contrarian online influencers, it's always those with access to the largest platforms, infinite resources, and armies of fawning sycophants who are the ones whining about how no one can hear them.
Now, Eric, there's lots of people doing stuff like that about it. Why do you think that the mainstream physics world is not taking this seriously enough?
Well, first of all, I disagree. You see, part of what's going on is that Sean is part of a group of physics influencers who are constantly spreading misinformation, which leads to a climate of fear.
The truth is that we never stop hearing from Eric. When it comes to online physics spaces, people like Eric have the bullhorn. Being in the online physics space is like having fucking Weinstein tinnitus.
That sound. That's what some people are hearing all the time. So what's it like to have a constant screech in your ear that you can never escape? To never experience even a moment's silence, ever?
In addition, the idea that there is a huge swathe of high-profile science channels being massively incentivized to support the heterodoxy of mainstream particle or theoretical physics, and to produce long-form explainers of Higgs potential measurements, CKM triangles, or string theory is utterly laughable. Look how many of the most popular online particle physics videos are not in fact anything to do with science, but are rather influencers, often with little to no knowledge of physics, lazily bashing string theory, or saying particle physics is dead, or misrepresenting the use cases for future colliders. This is where the true online incentives lie, in creating lazy, easy to churn out, repetitive bashing of expert fields. It's the same contrarian drivel we see on public health, vaccines, climate science, and other politically charged topics, just transposed onto physics. And this is Eric's role, dragging tired contrarian and culture war talking points into the physics space. It's why people like Sean Carroll have found themselves having to explain and represent the establishment heterodoxy. Even the terminology is ridiculous on platforms like YouTube.
I'm a working physicist. I am a professor in a physics department. I write physics papers. I have found myself in the awkward and unenviable position of defending the establishment heterodoxy. Like, it's never what I imagined I would be doing, but there's good reasons why the heterodoxy is the heterodoxy.
And it's the reason why a lot of the arguments Eric employs against physicists are lazy, boring, and tedious rehashes of boilerplate culture war talking points. The elites are lying to you. The institutions have become corrupted. Mavericks and heterodox voices are being suppressed. Shady puppet masters are controlling entire fields of people. You've heard all of these arguments 100 times before, from every 10-a-penny hack on X or Rumble. It's also why the arguments we see in comment sections covering for Eric's poor performance on Morgan's show are the same tired arguments you see in other contrarian and culture war spaces. Spaces Eric is more than happy to haunt. The simple fact is, the stuff Eric babbles about isn't off limits. It's never off YouTube. And it's the limit that all lazy YouTube contrarian crap converges to. Why do you think all of these people end up finding one another and all lean hard into culture war topics? It's productive and lucrative, and it's what their audiences want.
No. This is too easy. This is too easy.
Eric's ideas only exist on YouTube. It's hype, clicks, and interpersonal drama that give them life. Remember how Eric Weinstein used Terrence Howard's rise to prominence, not only to get back on Rogan's podcast, but also to suggest that academics are aloof and condescending because they refuse to spend countless hours dealing with Terrence, a guy who thinks 1 × 1 = 2 and is a self-confessed wife beater.
I wanted you to talk to someone who's had a deep education in it, and let's see like what he believes about these ideas, and maybe you guys can collaborate, or just like let's start from Eric. Like what out of the podcast that I did with Terrence really stood out with you, or something that you wanted to?
Well, what I thought is I have to be honest. I've been listening. I was not so happy with certain things that happened in the podcast, and then I started hearing the response to it. And I was much more infuriated by the response than anything I heard in the podcast, because I thought that a lot of people just used their position of greater formal education in some of these areas to be jerks and to be really dismissive and pretend that they couldn't understand things that you were saying. And no, I'm not kidding around.
I heard
because I think this thing goes out to millions of people, and whatever. Let me just say something else positive about Terrence. What he just did was very big. He said, "Thank you to the haters." I haven't gotten to that plane of existence
You gotta stay
yet.
offline. I keep telling you. Some people just shouldn't be reading the comments.
It's not the online stuff. It's the academic stuff. The academic stuff is really it's vicious stuff.
Yes.
And it's always with like a pretend smile on the face, so it's the worst.
Once you see what Eric really is, a third-rate pundit and culture war crank, optimizing his output for contrarian engagement, you can't unsee it. It's like the sun.
We keep tripping on these official statecraft narratives. That's why they won't let us question the Zelensky stuff. They won't let us question the origin of COVID. They won't let us question the vaccines. They won't let us question whether there are therapeutics. These are all cobalt on baby things. It's horse dewormer. What's wrong with you people? You're all lunatics. You're pathological losers. Okay, I get it. You're just destroying my Wikipedia entry because I keep asking questions. Because actually you need to have a timeout. You're out of control. I'm fine.
Yeah, you look it.
But you're going to turn this into pathologizing. When you pathologize people who've seen the truth, now you've got a real problem. You gaslit American citizens because you couldn't do your effing job? Really? That's interesting. Did you kill anyone? Did you do wet work? Did you do digital wet work? What did we just find out from the Twitter files, right? How many times did I say, I'm being throttled, I'm being manipulated? The government doesn't want to take responsibility. We have this, what is it, GEC that's from the State Department. We have CISA inside of the Department of Homeland Security. These people are creating fake conversations on Twitter. They're creating fake reports about the Hunter Biden laptop to influence the election. We didn't have a free and fair election. It had nothing to do with ballot stuffing or miscounting. So I believe that partially why we're not talking is that we've done so many bad things around UFOs that we don't want to come clean.
Wow, that's interesting.
Don't get conned. Your time is more valuable. There are, of course, large mainstream physics channels like PBS Spacetime or Veritasium, and I strongly suggest you go and look at those instead of watching hours of Eric rambling on. However, I very rarely see these channels taking Eric to task. They tend, in my experience, to just ignore him and avoid engaging. So where is this huge pressure being put on universities to give Eric the cold shoulder? Answer: much like the strongly interacting particles predicted by geometric unity, it does not exist. The channels that tend to call out Eric are headed by sociologists and psychologists, channels like Decoding the Gurus. These channels focus on Eric's deceptive rhetoric, narcissistic and self-aggrandizing behavior, and grievance mongering. And damn, do they have a lot of material to work with.
This is what I call a target-rich environment.
And by the way, if physicists and influencers are trying to put pressure on universities to keep Eric out, then by Eric's own admission, they aren't doing a very good job. Because Eric seems to have free reign to do multiple-hour lectures at numerous universities and claims that he is more than welcome on many physics campuses.
I, for example, found the following quote of Sean: what I really, really want to get across to the audience is that nobody in physics departments is discussing this with other people in physics departments. Now, I don't happen to be coming to you from a physics department at the moment, but I happen to be on a 5-day visit to a leading physics department. And in this situation, I just had a 9-hour conversation and talk with 3 hours or 4 hours rather of that being an explication of geometric unity. Sean is insistent that the idea that somehow I am not choosing to go through the usual channels and instead talking as he is right now via YouTube is somehow significant when I've just given talks in 3 different countries on dark energy. And by the way, every time I talk about talking about this, somebody is telling me don't talk about the fact that you're actually in a physics department. And what I'm trying to tell you is I give talks in physics departments, I hang out with physics colleagues, I'm welcomed at places like the Institute for Advanced Study, MIT, et cetera, and yet I have to deal with this nonsense. I talk to both physics colleagues.
So what's the problem exactly? How can Eric be welcome and shut out? How can these two things be true simultaneously? Answer: they can't. It's a Schrodinger's cat of bullshit.
Both. How can it be both? It can't. It can't. But it is. It's paradoxical, and yet it works.
Jesus, if I wandered around university campuses as much as Eric does, it would be a police matter. Theoretical physicists don't want to talk to Eric Weinstein because he hasn't produced anything meaningful, won't submit to peer review, and says dumb shit like, I don't know. Physicists are sociopaths who created nukes and now won't take geometric unity serious enough to build a spacecraft to get us off Earth. Or something.
Now, if that's true, and we can leave, and we can't civilize ourselves, and we bring this mad technology with us, this ability to destroy, I personally feel responsible in a way that my colleagues don't. They have these ideas like, oh, I'm a physicist, it's just fun, it's really interesting, it's a bunch of puzzles. My feeling is, you doomed the human race, and you don't feel responsible for building a lifeboat, for saving us, for... Like, what kind of a sociopath are you? Like, I'm not even a physicist, Joe, and I feel responsible. And this gets back, to some weird stuff. about.
So they're not thinking about that. They're thinking about the equations they're working on. They're thinking about the puzzles they're trying to solve.
It's fun. I get to play. It's, universe this and puzzle that. And it's just like, please.
UAPs are likely aliens because UFO encounter stories are similar. And the guys from Skinwalker Ranch who believe in werewolves and ghosts also know some tensors.
What caused this shift in you to think about UFOs and UFO reports as being credible? Because we're talking theoretically, and you're talking about your understanding of dimensions.
Because I thought it was a smokescreen that we were using to do aerospace engineering projects. I thought it was like Operation Fortitude or Operation Bodyguard. Right. And so it's like, okay, please don't bother me with your sci-fi stories. It's space opera, for the same reason that I don't go into a Scientology center and spend all my time thinking about Xenu. I'm not going to spend all my time worried about space opera.
And what changed?
Meeting an enormous number of very sober, very grown-up people who seem to be changed, alter, and believe that this is real. I have met an enormous number of people now who have had personal, firsthand, like sober people who've had crazy firsthand encounters. I don't understand how they're doing this as actors. Very often it's unwanted. It ruins their lives. It's sad. I ended up in San Marino at Lou Elizondo's invitation, and then Lou couldn't come, so I ended up speaking in Lou's place at a UFO meet. It was crazy. But I met so many people who were just like, Eric, let me explain my experience to you. And I'm just not prepared for these highly detailed stories that have so much similarity one to the next. Like the Skinwalker Ranch thing on the History Channel looks incredibly junky, put out by Prometheus Entertainment. I know Brandon Fugel, the owner of the ranch, and I know Eric Bard. We keep talking via phone. Eric Bard is like almost the only other person who has some idea of what differential forms are, tensor analysis is. He's a sober, normal human being sitting out there on a ranch trying to figure out what the hell he's looking at. I don't think he's lying to me.
And believes a whole raft of conspiracy-addled nonsense.
And I think that we have to just talk about the fact that the United States is attacking ordinary, intelligent human beings by depriving them of any basic knowledge of what is actually going on. We don't know what happened with the origin of COVID. We have no idea about Epstein. We don't know what's going on with the vaccines. We don't understand the source of the inflation. We blinded ourselves from looking at the M1 monetary aggregate when the Fed pumped us full of cheap cash. We have no clue how to resolve something as dumb as the Epstein. To whom did Ghislaine traffic? I don't know.
Yeah, well, can't find it. Sorry, bye.
So this is what's causing, in part, our friends to go crazy. Several years ago, Sam Harris had good input. Jordan Peterson had good input. Brett Weinstein had good input. Most of them, I don't think, have figured out that they're starved for information, and I'm going to say something very heterodox to the heterodoxy. The heterodoxy was never meant to take over for the orthodoxy. The orthodoxy was something that needed correction. The purpose of the heterodoxy is to say, you're 12 degrees off, you're 3 degrees off. Mm-hmm. What do you do when you're like 168 degrees off? And like the fine-tuning that heterodoxy can do is not sufficient to correct this ship.
Eric is not owed engagement from physicists. He has to earn it. He has not.
Would you display this as a trophy? Do you have a pet?
Okay, so maybe Eric's ideas are being heard, but what if physicists just can't comprehend anything outside the heterodoxy of string theory? Eric claims that string theory is completely over-dominant, cannot be dislodged, and hoovers up all talent and attention, meaning that ring-stinging, shit-hot, revolutionary ideas like geometric unity can't get a fair hearing. He claims that celebrated physicist Edward Witten has such an enormous power level that he's cowed physicists into submission and corrupted the field to such an extent that hardly anyone dares challenge the orthodoxy that is string theory.
Everything shifted towards string theory, which happened in 1983 at the University of Pennsylvania when a fellow named Edward Witten gave the first lecture that I think he ever did publicly on string theory. And his will and his mind were so powerful and his influence so completely commanding that the entire sociology of the field turned on a dime.
Ed Witten cannot be questioned. He is the Voldemort of theoretical physics.
One single individual who is the most dominant mind on planet Earth at the moment, effectively Voldemort, the person whose name we are a little bit afraid to invoke and cause wrath, said in 1984, no, string theory is the way. This anomaly cancellation was unexpected, and it clearly points to the fact that we are, ladies and gentlemen, we are about to quantize.
Who's that person?
Edward Witten.
And in physics circles, you're not allowed to bring this guy up?
No, we talk about him. Everybody talks about him. But to challenge him?
What's more, Eric claims that he's one of the very few who was in the room decades ago when Big Ed changed the course of physics.
And Piers, I just need to get to one further thing, which is that the really significant problem, I would say I am the only person in Generation X to have actually been present in the room when everything shifted towards string theory.
I was there, Gandalf. I was there 3,000 years ago. I was there the day the strength of men failed.
Just in passing, Eric has an incredibly bizarre and creepy obsession with Ed Witten. Eric claims, without evidence, that Ed Witten and Eric Seiberg stole equations from him, equations we now call the Seiberg-Witten equations, and have used them to advance their work.
People have built on my ideas since 1994. The equations that Natty Seiberg and Ed Witten introduced that took over the world were called the insufficiently nonlinear equations when I was at Harvard in 1987 and introduced them.
So this was my trajectory. This is why I left mathematics in part, because I realized that there was just no honor. There was no way of making a name and like people are just going to give away my stuff. So when I did this draft of GU, I said, I'm an entertainer. People don't have any clue why. It's because I have copyright protection. If I release a work of entertainment, you can't just name it after yourself or your friend or whoever you're upset with. That might hurt you. It's like, that's mine. It's my work of entertainment. I own the Portal podcast. Tough shit. Now, all that is long in the past. I don't want the Seiberg-Witten equations, which is what they're now called. Natty Seiberg and I have worked this out years ago at a meeting in San Francisco. He got $3 million. I forced him to give me a hug in front of the Institute for Advanced Study. Call it even. This is so much bigger than this. Those things, the Seiberg-Witten equations, is the barest thumbnail of what's coming. And if we don't use this stuff, we're doomed here with Xi and Biden and Kamala and Trump and Putin and Zelensky and Khamenei and all of these idiots. We're not going to make it. What I work on, where I've disappeared, where's the portal? We like the portal. It's like, do you notice how everything that you love gets destroyed? Jordan Peterson, Brett Weinstein, Sam Harris, even Lex Friedman. They go after Lex Friedman after I warn Lex they're going to come for you because of his reading list and because they misportray him as if he's claiming to be an MIT professor, which he's never claimed in his life. They destroy all of us if we don't sing from the hymnal. This is so important to me because it's hope. If I'm wrong, then maybe we don't have a way off this planet. Maybe we don't have a way to the solar system, out of the solar system. That's bad news.
This is one of several accusations Eric makes about high-level physicists supposedly stealing his work. Now, it's true that Eric worked on related equations in his thesis, but this strikes me as a very Robert Malone, I am the founder of mRNA technology because I did a small amount of related work many, many years ago type of deal. It also strikes me as very similar to Eric's brother Brett's claim that biologist Carroll stole his work on mice telomeres.
My paper was motivated by interest in the evolutionary dynamics around senescence. I wasn't, pursuing grants or anything like that. I was just working on a puzzle I thought was interesting. Carroll has, of course, gone on to win a Nobel Prize for her co-discovery with Elizabeth Grider of telomerase, the enzyme that lengthens telomeres. But anyway, she's a heavy hitter in the academic world. I don't know exactly what her purpose was. I do know that she told me she wasn't planning to publish, and I do know that I discovered that she was in the process of publishing very late. And when I asked her to send me the paper to see whether or not she had put evidence in it that the hypothesis had come from me, she grudgingly sent it to me, and my name was nowhere mentioned, and she broke contact at that point. What it is that motivated her, I don't know. But I don't think it can possibly be that this result is unimportant.
It seems all a little bit too convenient for the Weinstein mythos. I wonder what the probability of producing two legendary, suppressed, misunderstood geniuses under one roof really is. It's a good job that the Weinsteins don't seem to be Bayesians.
You mean not good like 1 out of 100?
I'd say more like 1 out of 1,000,000.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
Yeah! I'm also not quite sure how Eric balances the horrific cognitive dissonance that must be caused by the fact that if geometric unity were worth a damn, Ed Witten would have presumably already stolen it from Eric's public webpage. If Witten and others really are so keen on stealing Eric's groundbreaking work, it seems odd that not one theorist has cribbed from Eric's freely available geometric unity paper and drawn his ire. I mean, it's right there. And yet, over the last 4 years, no one of any standing seems to be interested in taking a sneak peek. Very odd indeed. But, back to the main point. Is it true that physicists, like an intrigued cat, are entirely blinded by strings? No, it's not. It's just Eric's main character syndrome playing up again. The idea that one man is blinding the entirety of theoretical physics makes no sense to anyone who has ever worked in a physics department, where some of the sharpest minds are constantly at loggerheads with and trying to outdo one another. It's a tale designed to validate Eric's grievances today and suggest that the wider situation is similar today. Mavericks, like him, still can't get a sniff. It's all about Eric in the end. The suggestion that Ed Witten has cast a spell on all of physics is self-serving, ridiculous, insulting, self-aggrandizing, and ahistorical. String theory is the theoretical framework that currently holds sway because string theorists have made greater progress than many other groups of physicists in solving problems in theoretical physics.
I'm interested in questions, if you did have a theory of quantum gravity, what could they teach me about particle physics or other things? And I find that that's taking me to string theory more often than anything else because they've gone farther in the sense that, in my assessment anyway, that they have kind of crossed a series of tests that other quantum gravities haven't. It doesn't mean they can't, and maybe they will in the future. But you can ask questions in a very crisp way with what the string theorists have done because they've gone so far. And I think that's what they've achieved. And so the idea that somehow there's a you have to bend the knee to them. I think what's really happening is it's a marketplace of ideas, and they're winning, and they should be acknowledged for that. And it's true that doesn't mean they get a free pass. You know,
there's a place for dissent, though, right? The idea seems to be that there's no dissent, and you either go into that or you don't go into anything.
Which is not true. I mean, the people that are often complaining are not string theorists, and yet they're still funded. so it's kind of hard to know how that works.
Sean Carroll correctly points out just how disingenuous and self-serving Eric's portrayal of the history of string theory is.
Look, the story Eric just told is a kind of wacky and wildly misleading history of physics in the last 50 or 60 years. The idea of quantum gravity is a very natural one because the world runs by the rules of quantum mechanics, as far as we know. This is the International Year of Quantum because it's the 100th anniversary of really figuring out how quantum mechanics works. And the thing about quantum mechanics is it's not a theory by itself. It's a framework in which you can do theories, in contrast with classical mechanics from Isaac Newton that came before it. And gravity, our best current theory of gravity from Einstein, the theory of general relativity, is a thoroughgoingly classical theory. Certainly, the default expectation is that someday we will better understand gravity at the quantum level. You don't have to think that because you don't have to think anything. You're welcome to come up with better theories. But again, that's the default expectation. If you have a different point of view, there's a certain burden of proof to convince people that it's interesting to contemplate this other point of view. The idea of actually doing the detailed calculations to quantize gravity goes back to at least the 1950s, but it instantly hit roadblocks, and physicists were smart smart enough to know that it wasn't working the way they wanted it to. The very simple thing you do, if I can get just a little bit detailed for a second here, because people never hear this, and I think it's really, really important to understand why string theory is so popular. If you want to invent a new quantum mechanical theory of the world, the first thing you do is you ask yourself, if I have two particles and they come together and scatter, there's a probability that different things will happen. I'm going to make photons, I'm going to make electrons and positrons or whatever, and you calculate that probability. And the famous triumph of mid-20th century physics was to show that you can do that and get a finite answer. If you're sloppy about it, your answer turns out to be infinity and your theory is on the wrong track. Everything that we know about in the physical world has a nice finite answer in this quantum mechanical realm, except for gravity. Gravity doesn't fit. And indeed, it was recognized pretty quickly that there was a good reason why gravity doesn't fit, and it was almost impossible to imagine fitting gravity in, namely that gravity interacts with everything. Gravity interacts with photons, with electrons, with quarks, with whatever. And so when you do this scattering experiment, you do the calculation, everything in the universe contributes to the infinitely big answer that you don't want to get. Apparently, what you would need is some kind of miraculous cancellation between all the different contributions from all the different fields. And people looked at that and said, we have no idea how to make that happen. Let's not worry about quantum gravity. And then string theory comes along. And again, it wasn't even trying to be a theory of gravity, but when they do this calculation, the miraculous cancellation happens in string theory. You get a finite answer to what happens when you scatter different particles off of each other. That is right now the only theory in which that miraculous happening actually works. And this was finally put together as a sort of sensible, viable theory in the mid-1980s. And it was a calculation by John Schwartz and Michael Green that showed that the theory did not have what are called anomalies. And you can look up the magazines at the time. Physics Today ran an article saying, anomaly cancellation launches superstring bandwagon. The point is, the reason why I had to go into those details is many, many physicists instantly became interested in string theory and quantum gravity who were not before. But the reason they did is not because Ed Witten is a smart guy and he towers over the field. It's because there was a calculation that showed the theory is promising. Physicists are not sheep. If Ed Witten had said we should all work on this, but everyone else looked at it and thought it wasn't very promising, he would have been ignored. But since then, there's no competitor to string theory that has had that miraculous feature that string theory has.
Initially, string theory was a small field that garnered little to no interest. It had problems making its way. But in the 1980s, that all changed, due to the successes of the theory. String theory was under the radar, sidelined and poorly thought of, until physicists did the work and showed that it solves problems. Eric's ideas do not solve these problems or any other relevant problems in physics, as his framework is mathematically unsound. String theory might not be the final key to understanding the microscopic world. However, it is the most promising framework we currently have for attempting to understand the mysteries of our universe at the smallest scale, according to experts. If something better comes along, the focus of physicists will shift, just as it did in the 1980s. That's how physics works. Of course, that argument presupposes that different approaches to string theory are being taken in physics departments, and that is obviously the case.
But also, I really don't want people to get the idea that string theory has some dominant picture. In my department at Johns Hopkins, we have... Let me just finish and then you can talk. I think it's a good system. In my department at Johns Hopkins, we have 6 professors in the theoretical physics group. One of them does string theory, and even he only does it sort of half-time. I wish we had more, honestly. This is very typical. Even at the most stringy departments, it's maybe half the people who do string theory. There are plenty of other approaches being advocated, and many of them do make different predictions, and we're looking for them in cosmology and astrophysics and elsewhere. And finally, does your theory solve any interesting problems that we already thought we had? That's the reason why string theory became interesting, because we had this problem with quantum gravity, that it gave infinite answers, and string theory solved that problem. And again, I see none of that in Eric's paper. So it's very possible that somewhere in Eric's theory there are interesting ideas, but he has given us no reason to think that it is a promising theory. I encourage other people who would like to have an impact on the research agenda of modern physics to take these easy steps rather than going on podcasts and talking about their victimization.
I am an experimental particle physicist, not a theorist, but most of the whining about string theory I see online seems to come from high-profile influencers and tenured professors doing exactly the kind of work that they say isn't being done, and simply being irritated that their pet theories are not the dominant ideas of the field. I'm sorry, that must suck. Allow me to be very clear. We should be open to new, fresh, and even revolutionary ideas when seeking to solve difficult problems, like the nature of gravity. And physicists already are. I'd like to see a lot more money for a myriad of theoretical research programs. There is nothing wrong with taking revolutionary new approaches to tackling quantum gravity. It is problematic, however, when someone wears the garb of an intellectual maverick to smear physicists, enrich and empower themselves, and to draw attention away from those working in good faith, all while offering nothing but grand claims and clown car manuscripts. And that is what Eric does.
He's a joke. He's a motherfucking joke.
The fact that string theory is not perfect, or hasn't made as much progress as we subjectively might like, should not mean that Eric's broken ideas get a free pass and equal respect in the halls of academia. That is a basic false dichotomy fallacy, but it's one I see a lot in online spaces. There are many approaches beyond string theory that are mathematically consistent and deserve and garner more attention than Eric's. The bottom line is that Eric Weinstein wants to whine about what Ed Witten has done, or how biased experts are, or his own victimization, ahead of submitting his work to peer review. He wants to focus on sociology rather than physics. He wants to convince you that you should take him seriously without doing the work to earn being taken seriously, or simply because other approaches are imperfect. Eric is always the hero in his own internal play, and there's always an excuse for why he isn't the hero in anyone else's. Excuses that obfuscate his own failures. Why are we still taking this guy seriously? So, what's the truth about Eric Weinstein and geometric unity? The truth is that Eric and his ideas are not being shut out by anything bar their lack of promise. To the extent that Eric doesn't get as much engagement with experts as he might like, it's for three main reasons. 1. He assiduously avoids peer review and feedback. 2. He acts like an accusatory asshole while demanding snivelling civility in return. And 3. He is a terrible science communicator. The truth is that Eric does his damnedest to shut himself out of physics. Let's start with the first reason Eric isn't taken seriously. Eric refuses to engage with scientists in a normal manner, assiduously avoiding peer review and refusing to correct fatal errors in his theories, despite having had decades to do so.
Peer review is a cancer from outer space. It came from the biomedical community. It invaded science. The old system, because I have to say this because many people who are now professional scientists have an idea that peer review has always been in our literature, and it absolutely motherfucking has not.
When experts have assessed Eric's work and blown holes through it, Eric has not responded by acknowledging these issues, improving his paper, or making changes. He has instead immediately attacked and maligned those making the critiques, including linking Tim Nguyen with stalking, physical threats, theft of work, anti-Semitism, and misogyny.
Sorry, before you go, Eric, I was actually wondering specifically when we'll hear like a debate with you and Theo and Timothy about G.
Sorry, who's Theo?
Timothy and Theo, they put out the retort to...
Sorry, who's Theo?
Theopolia and Timothy Wynn.
I'm not aware of Theopolia. Where did
we don't know who he is. Yeah, we have
who's
to know
Theopolia?
Who he is.
Do you know who Timothy Wynn is?
Let's talk about Theopolia. Who's Theopolia?
He's the co-author from the paper.
Who is he?
Timothy Wynn.
Yeah, who is he? I don't know.
That wasn't the question, though,
No,
right?
that is the question.
No, the question was...
No, that is the question. No, you're not understanding. You're not understanding me. I've never heard in the history of physics anybody expecting
to be taken seriously as an anonymous critic. And the behavior of those gentlemen, however many there are, 2 or more, including various misogynistic comments against my colleagues, disrespecting Sabine Hassenfelder, who, while she may be a critic, is also a friend of mine. I'm fucking sick of these 2 people.
And instead looks to label those making them bad people. Well, Eric, it takes one to know one. Eric even goes so far as to put booby traps in his own papers, suggesting that physicists cannot and should not build on his work. This is entirely at odds with how science usually works.
This work of entertainment is a draft work in progress, and it may not be built upon. So we're not allowed to think about Eric's theory and write a follow-up paper about it.
You're very much allowed, Sean.
To everything that is normally done in scientific discourse. You hope that people build upon your theories. You don't try to prevent them.
But Eric is apparently a very special little flower.
I'm not one of the bottle. I think I'm a special one.
Eric claims to have these highbrow aims of making humans a multiplanetary species. However, in reality, he's seemingly far more interested in ensuring that he is at the centre of any would-be leap forward than helping to maximise the possibility of such a leap forward occurring. Eric could submit his work to peer review any time. This would allow scientists to assess it and draw out any useful threads. It would also allow the fatal errors and misconceptions I have mentioned to finally be addressed. Eric himself knows his paper is incomplete and needs input, so let's get it. There is nothing wrong with taking radical approaches to big problems in physics, and if experts can extract something useful from Eric's work, that would be a fantastic outcome. Eric, please submit. I want you to submit. I dare you to submit. All of that recognition is just one peer review cycle away.
Do it! Just do it!
This brings me to the second reason why Eric isn't taken very seriously. He treats people like complete shit while demanding snivelling civility in return. Eric is never wrong. So if highly qualified experts like Sean Carroll disagree with him, they must be unqualified and just not get it. In the Uncensored interview, Eric continuously suggests that experts would all fall in line behind his ideas if only they understood them and took them more seriously.
The problem, Sean, is that you and I are naturally allied on almost everything. Sean and I really shouldn't be divided, but we appear to be. I don't understand it. You know all this stuff, and I know this stuff. We know the same people. We probably can work in the same notation. My guess is that if you and I got over whatever this bizarre tension is between us and buried the hatchet, my guess is that after 2 days, you'd say, boy, I really just didn't understand what he was saying.
No expert criticism is ever valid, or even in good faith. If you disagree with Eric's paper, well, that just means you haven't read it.
Now, the thing that's truly radical about geometric unity, and I think Sean would probably agree with this if he's read it at all, and I'm not sure that he has.
Except, of course, when you're a world-leading expert who has read it.
The good news is I have read Eric's paper. Here it is. I actually have it here, right here. And it's worse than you would think.
This idea that you can only disagree with Eric's genius if you just don't get it is, of course, pushed by Piers Morgan at the end of the interview.
I realise you are at loggerheads about a few things. I suspect, as Eric said, Sean, if you spent a couple of days together over a few pints of foaming British ale, or whatever your tipple may be, you probably find you end up best buddies.
I don't believe you.
These suggestions are insulting and wrong. They rob scientists of their agency and falsely boost the image of Eric as some titan of theoretical physics, rather than a contrarian podcaster and third-rate pundit. The only person who gets it is Eric. Everyone else is an idiot. This assumption of infallibility leads Eric to treat highly regarded theoretical physicists like Sean Carroll with contempt. After Sean criticised his paper and words, not him personally, Eric couldn't take it and went off on an ad hominem rant about Sean's employment history.
How dare you cast shade and aspersions of the kind that I wouldn't seek to cast on you, but I will now.
Okay.
I'm not seeking your favor, nor do I need to seek your approval. As you know, you failed to gain tenure at the University of Chicago. You're not highly regarded in the field. And again, I'm only returning the shade in which you just yourself cast. I wouldn't have done this otherwise. You then spent time as a non-tenured faculty at Caltech, and you only gained tenure in a non-standard professorship. You're not a leading person in the field.
You mad, bro? I'm chill as a bean over here. You stay mad.
I would never cast aspersions about people, but then immediately goes off on a pre-prepared ad hominem rant of personal attack points. Yeah. Okay, big guy.
You're a fucking liar, by the way.
I'm saying something else. Lenny is a cantankerous, fun, raconteur,
Gruff,
ethnic,
New York.
everything. I'm down for that.
I have great admiration for you as First Ranger. You know, my brother once told me that nothing someone says before the word but really counts.
But you go after Peter Woit, you go after Garrett Lisi, you go after me, you go after everybody else, and then you say we have to go back to the beginning of our assumptions. And you're like, yes, 40 years in the making, go ahead and say it, of string theory. And I'm thinking, no, you don't get to do that. You ruin too many lives. You ruin too many careers. These things have consequences. Who gets health care? Who has a pension? Who has security to be able to say so? Who gets to train more students? No, you failed. You lost. It's over. You're in your mid-80s. Ed Whitten is going to turn 74 this year. Retired forcibly from the IAS, which has a retirement age. You don't get to say, I have no idea who that is about Eric Weinstein, when I can tell you the exact date when I last talked to Lenny.
How dare you cast shade and aspersions of the kind that I wouldn't seek to cast on you?
And the behavior of those gentlemen, however many there are, 2 or more, including various misogynistic comments against my colleagues, disrespecting Sabine Hassenfelder, who, while she may be a critic, is also a friend of mine. I'm fucking sick of these 2 people.
How dare you cast shade and aspersions?
You doomed the human race, and you don't feel responsible for building a lifeboat, for saving us, for, like, what kind of a sociopath are you?
Shade and aspersions.
Of course, Eric's ridiculous criticisms of experts like Sean Carroll barely make any sense and are a bundle of self-contradictory nonsense and hypocrisy. Eric calls Sean unqualified to judge his physics paper.
What you've just said and what the aspersion that you have just cast, you are simply not qualified to say. What you have said is that I have given no reason.
Eric also seems to relax these standards when Brian Keating or Kurt Jaimungal glow about his work. It seems that Eric's aversion to interloping astronomers is ephemeral and strongly depends on how obsequious they are towards him.
I think what you're going to find is if you look at this 3-hour documentary that was just made on geometric unity, which itself has flaws, by a person who does not have a PhD, it evidences the highest level of understanding of geometric unity found in a second person over 41 years of trying to have conversations with physicists who tend to be polarized by one collection of theories led by a single individual.
Know that he's the God who qualifies the unqualified.
Of course, when your entire shtick is, I am an underappreciated maverick fighting against a clearly broken system, it's unclear why any of these qualifications should matter to Eric at all.
Why do you care?
No one cares about it.
At another point, Eric even directs Sean to spend less time on YouTube and more time in his physics department.
I highly advise you to spend more time in your physics department and less time on YouTube. Is that this is not a serious thing. Nobody's taking it seriously.
Coming from someone who is never off their endless YouTube grievance tour, this is a lack of introspection so massive that I'm surprised it doesn't warp the fucking space-time around it.
Yes, there is a reason so few of us are self-aware.
The reality is that Sean is far more qualified than Eric. He has far more publications, is incredibly accomplished in the field of theoretical physics, and is a stunningly better communicator. He literally wrote the book on general relativity. It should be noted at this point that Eric recently pinned a video to the top of his Twitter profile, trying to convince you of what actually happened on Piers Morgan. A clear sign that he's not at all concerned about his performance. In that video, Eric suggests that Sean did not read or understand his paper, because he does in fact mention elements that Sean claimed were not present.
As you know, because you've read the paper, what you said about Lagrangians is false. What you said about predictions is false.
However, the point Sean was making is not that Eric's paper doesn't include some correct buzzwords or badly presented formulae and matrices Eric can point to post hoc and say, aha, I include the word Lagrangian, Sean is a big liar. What Sean is saying is that these elements are not presented in any meaningful, intelligible, or logical fashion. When Sean observes that there is no Lagrangian in Eric's paper, he's not playing a semantic game. He's invoking a scientific standard, whereby a Lagrangian is not merely a mathematical adornment, but a functional object from which dynamics flow, predictions are computed, and the fabric of interaction is rigorously derived. In quantum field theory, the Lagrangian is axiomatic. Theorists define a Lagrangian and then apply the Euler-Lagrange equations to it to produce field equations we recognise. For example, the Dirac equation, which describes spin 1/2 fermions, or the Klein-Gordon equation, which describes spin 0 scalars. These field equations allow particle interactions to be determined, interaction cross-sections to be calculated, and ultimately, the creation of a mathematical machinery that allows predictions about our universe to be made. In his geometric unity paper, Eric introduces a highly unconventional object called the observerse, from which he sketches a Lagrangian-like object that supposedly encodes all of physics. But this object is never formally derived, properly varied, nor shown to reproduce known physics like the Standard Model, general relativity, or quantum field dynamics. Despite Eric's pronouncements to the contrary, Eric includes elements he calls Lagrangians, sure, but not in the sense that any working physicist would recognise. Crucially, there is no application of the Euler-Lagrange equations to Eric's supposed Lagrangian to produce field equations we recognise, no Dirac equation, no Klein-Gordon equation, no Yang-Mills, no Einstein-Hilbert structure. It's all gestural. Eric handwaves and hides behind obscure geometric constructions. Eric's Lagrangian lacks the structural features physicists demand, a clearly defined action principle, variation under symmetries, coupling constants tied to observable phenomena, and a machinery to compute amplitudes and make predictions. Geometric unity lacks a usable Lagrangian, one that would allow a physicist to go from principle to prediction, from model to measurement. That's not a smear. That's a fact. Eric claims to have a Lagrangian, but the moment anyone knowledgeable examines it closely, it becomes clear that it is, at best, a symbolic placeholder, and at worst, a hand-waving gesture cloaked in mathematical jargon. Given this reality, Eric can't just point to a matrix and post hoc scribbled dark matter, or point to a mention of proton stability without having the ability to perform a relevant and rigorous supporting calculation, and then simply say, I covered all the bases and Sean is a liar. Eric also can't point to the fact that his ideas predict a changing dark matter density in the universe and claim that recent results from DESI vindicate that prediction.
You know, right now you've got a giant problem with something called DESI or DESI, the dark energy, spectroscopic instrument, which is at the moment going after Einstein's unwanted cosmological constant. That is not a constant. The dark energy is not a constant term. That is the only term that you can put into the Einstein field equations because the Einsteinian curvature satisfies an automatic differential equation called divergence free. So if you have another term in the equation, it has to have the same property. There's only one known automatic equation, which is that the metric of Einstein that creates space-time is annihilated by its own Levi-Civita connection. Sean, you have a serious problem with dark energy that you're developing, and it's going to go right through being a problem with lambda CDM to eventually being a problem with the Einstein field equations themselves, perched as they are atop the space of metrics as a completely inadequate space of field content.
Because geometric unity currently has no machinery to predict how that density should change. There's no way to vindicate geometric unity as opposed to 100 other speculative frameworks.
And Sean, you're misrepresenting things because I'm going to give a formula for the dark energy.
That's why Sean correctly points out that Eric's ideas solve no problems, make no predictions, and contain no relevant quantitative plots.
And this is why this paper is not going to appear in the peer-reviewed literature. It's not serious. It's a dog ate my homework kind of thing. If you have a dark matter thing, if you have a dark matter prediction, if you have a dark energy prediction, I want to see a plot in the paper. I want to see redshift versus distance. I want to see a calculation of a relic abundance so I can figure out how much dark matter is supposed to be. If you do that, people will pay attention to the theory. It's very possible. Look, I mean, I didn't say anything about Eric as a person, his history, or anything like that. I said things about the paper. Everything he says about me is like 90% true, as many things he says. The paper is not giving us any reason to think that this approach is promising. There is no quantum mechanics in the paper. There's no attempt at showing that this solves any of the known problems of quantum gravity. Again, it's not just about Eric, it's about anyone. If you want to make an impact on the physics research community, you have to give them a reason to think that what you do is promising.
Geometric unity simply doesn't have the machinery to produce such robust outputs. This is just Eric desperately trying to unseat Uncle Albert without having done the work to justify it. Weinstein until you Einstein, if you will. Regardless, Eric is now using the silly pinned video to smear Sean Carroll and the entire academy as liars, and suggesting that nothing they say can be trusted. It's the same rubbish you saw flung at Flint Dibble after the archaeologist exposed Graham Hancock on Joe Rogan. It's Darvo nonsense. Deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. Given the horrendous bad faith with which Eric repeatedly treats world-leading experts who do engage with his ideas, what is the incentive for anyone to consider Eric's work further, outside of peer review? Pointing out flaws just gets you harassed and chased by Eric's foaming fans online. It doesn't lead to introspection and improvements. It achieves nothing. It's a pointless and thankless task. This brings me to the third reason why Eric isn't taken seriously. He is an absolutely terrible science communicator and a horrific advocate for his own ideas.
Well, first, maybe let me make a comment about what Eric just said. He complained that there has not been any substantive discussion about geometric unity. I think that's because no one has any idea what you're talking about in the first place. I think you're severely underestimating the communication problem. You have to work much, much harder on that. And yeah, I watched your lecture, and I think that among the 500,000 people who watched your video, I'm probably one of those who have a pretty good starting point in understanding what you're even talking about, and even I only have a very vague idea what you're even up to.
Eric absolutely revels in making things sound complicated. He adds complexity and padding that creates no additional value and simply decreases clarity.
Now, if you ask me what's going on with geometric unity, I can say something very simply that because you have a very large viewership, will go out to many people. You won't understand it, but it'll be over very quickly, and it should be an astounding comment. If you take a Lorentzian metric as a section of a bundle of pointwise Lorentz metrics and pull back the positive Weyl spinners with suitable passing to maximal compact subgroup, you get one generation of Petit Salam grand unified fermions. Now, that was very quick, but what it really just said is that general relativity knows the standard model.
This is not an outstanding comment. This is just word salad. It's designed to confuse people and make them believe that Eric is smarter than them. But trained physicists see right through it for the bluster that it is. Consider the difference between how Sean answers the simple question, will we ever be able to time travel? And how Eric answers the same question. First of all, Sean.
Sean, will we ever be able to time travel, either forwards or back?
Well, forwards, I time travel all the time. Yesterday, I time traveled 24 hours into the future, and here I am. I mean, that's not that hard. Einstein showed us that there's a trick. You can even travel into the future faster by either moving near the speed of light or by hanging out in a strong gravitational field like a black hole. Backwards in time, no. I don't think that we're going to be able to do it. I've written papers about it. It's something that is, I would say, conceivable but not plausible. We know how it might work in principle, but all of the indications are it's not going to work in practice.
Concise, easy to understand, relatable. Now, Eric.
Eric?
Well, as Sean has thoroughly digested my paper, he knows that I believe that there are either 5 or 7 dimensions of time in a 14-dimensional world, which is split 5 of time, 9 of space, or 7 of time, 7 of space. So when you talk about time travel, it's times travel. And only when time is one-dimensional is there an arrow of time. If there were 2 dimensions of time, you'd have a whirlpool. 3 dimensions would result in a right-hand rule of time. These things are technically called orientations. One of the things that is really interesting about multiple dimensions of time, which leads to something which is very poorly studied called ultra-hyperbolic equations, is that you have the opportunity of going back in time without going back through time. So just as you can play a record, and when the stylus comes to the inner circles of the record, you can jump again to any track that you like. On a cassette tape, you have to go back through time.
You're gonna be all right. You're gonna be all right. Please. Kill me. Just stay calm. We're gonna get you out of here.
So my belief is no, we will not go back through time, but we will have to figure out how to stop thinking in terms of initial conditions.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again.
Because it is only in the case of a single dimension of time leading to hyperbolic equations that you have that luxury. So I think that times travel is going to be perhaps the most interesting thing to come out when you ask, why should we worry about these things? Buckle up.
Pseudo-profound waffle that centers Eric and his ideas. It's always about Eric in the end. Here's another perfect example. Eric asked Sean.
Speaking about what I'm talking about, he said, this is not something that is going to be a thing. He also says that he hasn't read it. So let me say a bunch of things to Dr. Carroll. Dr. Carroll?
I am going to get to the truth.
I'd like to hear your explanation for 3 generations of flavor chiral fermions with the observed quantum numbers under the group SU3 cross SU2 cross U1.
This seems like an incredibly deep, difficult, and technical question. But all he really asked was, why does the standard model have the particles that it does? He just asked it in a way that makes the question sound incredibly complicated. Of course, the answer to this question is, we don't know. And neither does Eric, because his theory is mathematically mangled. It's one of the things we hope to learn more about at future Colliders. There are many more examples of this self-aggrandizing rambling throughout the Piers Morgan interview.
But one of the things that you just said is that it's a classical field theory that is not quantized. As you well know, there was a revolution in the 1970s which said that we blew Hamiltonian analysis and that in fact every phase space carrying a symplectic form can be treated locally as if that symplectic form is the curvature of a line bundle, and the L2 sections of that line bundle form a Hilbert space, and the P and Q coordinate functions can be promoted to operators. It said that wine is what you get when you stop grape juice from becoming vinegar, and in fact Hamiltonian analysis is what happens when you take a physical problem and you stop it from quantizing itself. That was one of the great errors of our time, that Hamiltonian analysis was actually pointing the way to saying that most classical problems contain the seeds of their own quantization. You know all this stuff, and I know this stuff. We know the same people.
And it's amazing how effective this obfuscatory nonsense is with contrarian audiences. It never ceases to amaze me how many people will admit they have no clue what Eric is saying, but are happy to back him to the hilt against far more impressive physicists and communicators. The number of people named Anti-Woke Warrior 872 or Red-Pilled 69 or Steve, who openly admit to knowing nothing about physics, but have incredibly abusive opinions on geometric unity and the flaws of string theory, is staggering. It seems that many simply want to listen to something that sounds smart, but which doesn't actually make them better informed. I find that quite sad and deeply troubling. Anyone can learn physics. I truly believe that. However, people need to stop equating the idea that they can't currently understand something with the idea that Eric is some kind of unparalleled genius. At some point, we have to stop mistaking obfuscation for depth. Now, you might say that Eric's inability to explain his ideas to the layperson is unimportant. However, this attitude seems to follow through into Eric's communication with experts and papers, which, as we have seen, are poorly presented and full of holes. Part of being a good scientist is being able to communicate your ideas to other experts so that they can be peer-reviewed. If Eric believes the world's foremost experts are misunderstanding his ideas and his papers, that's a him problem. Of course, peer review would help Eric to sharpen his message, but we've already covered his aversion to taking such a standard path. The tragic irony is that the very people who continue to champion Eric as some prophet of unorthodoxy are the ones insulating him from precisely the kind of robust challenge that would elevate his ideas. So, what's the summary of all of this? Well, this was a terrible but entirely predictable showing for Eric Weinstein, and encapsulated many of the reasons physicists simply don't take him very seriously. It was a significant strategic mistake for Eric to appear alongside a seasoned physicist and science communicator on such a large platform. The tactics he uses to bamboozle know-nothings like Joe Rogan and Dave Rubin don't work on domain experts. Eric pretends that he doesn't understand why physicists ignore him, but on this showing, it really is pretty obvious. A bizarre pseudo-industry has developed in online physics communication, where Eric and his work are venerated way above their standing and promise, in the hope of garnering clicks, likes, and clout, and riding Eric's coattails onto the Joe Rogan experience. That industry relies on the lazy tropes we see in all other contrarian and culture war media. Suggestions that entire fields have become corrupted. Insinuations that shady puppet masters are pulling the strings behind the scenes. Accusations that experts are lying to you to protect the status quo, and more. The blooming of that industry is partially the fault of physicists who have ceded online spaces to abusive publicity hounds and contrarians. However, the type of accusatory, fallacious, and insulting nonsense that Eric floods the zone with isn't just a problem for Ed Witten or Sean Carroll. It has wider ramifications for public trust in science and its ongoing funding. Anti-science is on the rise, and it's time to get our elbows in and push back. People like Eric Weinstein shouldn't be given a free pass because they say contrarian things. They need to put up or shut up. I want to know what you think, because you're the scholars of enlightenment that I do this for. So please take a moment, if you wish, to let me know down in the comment section. And if you like this video, please consider leaving a like, subscribing, setting up notifications, and sharing this video more widely. I can't tell you how much these simple actions help me out and how much I'd appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being scientific. Thanks for being bad.